discuss our public humanities fellowships and our community project grants. We'll start with a quick general overview of Humanities Montana and the types of projects we fund. Then we'll talk a little bit about eligibility in terms of who is able to apply for these two grant opportunities and what types of projects are eligible for funding. We'll also go through the fellowships and the community project grants and just kind of outline the key features of each with information about timelines and resources. And then we'll wrap up with a quick summary of how to submit an application. But if you have questions, we'll save those until the end. So who are we? Humanities Montana is Montana's state humanities council. Our mission is to serve Montana's multicultural communities through stories and conversation, and offer experiences that nurture imagination and ideas by speaking to Montana's diverse history, literature, and philosophy. We were established in 1972, and we're one of 56 councils across the US. And we are funded through the National Endowment for the Humanities, which means that we are re-granting federal dollars. Not every humanities council operates that way, but currently that is our funding structure. And the purpose of the humanities councils is to just better infuse humanities directly and effectively into public life. We produce, fund, create, and support humanities-based projects and programs, eye-opening cultural experiences, and meaningful conversations. And for over 50 years, our work has strengthened communities through grants and special programs that reach every corner of the state. And our goal is to connect people, to inspire ideas, and deepen mutual understanding. And we do this by applying things like critical thinking, informed reasoning, logic, historical learning and analysis, and creativity to modern, current, pressing topics, issues, and institutions of our world today. The first question everyone asks me when they're getting ready to, or they're exploring our grant opportunities or our programs is, what are the humanities? Or how do you define the humanities? And for us, the humanities is the examination of what it means to be human through a couple key lenses. So our role is to help translate some of these more traditional applications of the humanities disciplines, such as literature, history, philosophy, language, ethics, etc., into opportunities for the general public to learn and engage with new topics and conversations about the human experience that are timely and relevant to Montanans. Because we are the State Humanities Council, if you're looking to do humanities-focused work in a different state, there is a Humanities Council in that state as well. So our job is to be that conduit for a humanities program that's specific to Montana. And we do this through examining what it means to be human through the interpretation and discussion of all forms of thought, interest, and expression. Our emphasis, again, is on the public humanities, which means that we're looking at the humanities as more than just an academic discipline. And for us, the public humanities are a mode of inquiry and conversation that aims to engage, support, and challenge the ideals, beliefs, tensions, and prejudices of the communities in which we live. We believe that important thought can happen outside of the academy in neighborhood institutions, schools, churches, and at kitchen tables across the country. And we're especially interested in instances of the public humanities that promote civic engagement in raising critical issues facing everyday people and conducted with the hope of increasing participants' thirst for staying engaged. Rather than being defined by a rigid disciplinary boundary, we're looking at the humanistic lens, which emphasizes curiosity, questioning, and dialogue that matters. The second question I am asked by interested applicants is typically this, the arts versus humanities. And they're not the same. And that is why the Humanities Montana is served by both an arts council and a humanities council. And arts programs usually focus on creation and performance. Humanities programs focus on the interpretive aspects of the arts, such as discussions about their historical or philosophical context, a critical analysis of their methodology through lectures or films that look at characteristics of different art movements or periods. Occasionally, we will grant modest amounts for performance when such activities are teamed with interpretations, such as when a play or dance is preceded or followed by a lecture or scholar-led discussion. Another example is if for performances that are educational, if someone's doing a reenactment of a historical character or figure, it's educational, it's focused on history, and that is a performance that may be allowed. An application will not typically qualify as a humanities project if its primary objective is to support the production of new art in any medium, unless that artwork is significantly grounded in the aims of the humanities. And while artistic creativity is an essential human activity, applicants must demonstrate that they are engaging at a deep level with the study of that activity from a broader cultural, historical, or philosophical, theoretical perspective. And some examples might include doing research as an archive, producing a museum exhibit, or consulting with collaborators with distinct cultural knowledge in producing a film. Similarly, an application will not typically qualify as a humanities project simply by proposing a publicly disseminated medium such as a podcast, video, or website. And while storytelling is an important human mode of expression, a project's medium will not intrinsically qualify as having humanities content unless the applicant addresses the question of how they are using specific ideas or questions from humanities disciplines to develop, explore, or enhance their project. If the project is derived from environmental studies, math, science, or social science, the burden for the applicant is to demonstrate how the project's methods and personnel engage directly with the humanities. So on the other side of this grant webinar are a few lovely people who help make Humanities Montana possible. So I just like to give a quick introduction. Jill Baker is our executive director. John Clarenbach is our fiscal operations director. I am the grants and evaluation director. John Knight is our programs director, and Jenny Bevel is our program manager. We are in the process of bringing on a new development director. So at the next webinar, I'll be able to introduce our new staff person. We are physically located in Missoula, but we are a statewide organization. We have offices at the University of Montana, but we are not part of the University of Montana or any university system. So we are a separate private 501c3. It's a small but mighty team. You will often find us traveling across the state. My colleagues, John and Jenny, are actually on a giant road trip right now, visiting libraries, museums, meeting with schools. So even though we're here in Missoula, we do not stay in Missoula very often. A little bit about our impact. So through our grants and programs, almost all Montana counties have been involved in advancing the humanities with us. And audience participation in live and non-live humanities programming, so things that are recorded versus things that people can engage with in real time, led these humanities projects supported programming with over 700,000 touch points, right? Like not unique individuals, but 7,000 in attendance. And in 2023, we awarded over $168,000 in support of 55 humanities projects in 31 unique Montana communities. There are two things we do at Humanities Montana. One is our program, different programs, and the other is grants. So for programs, these are experiences that where we're providing essentially kind of direct service. Whereas grants are supporting other organizations or other individuals to carry out the work. For our programs, 4 of the primary programs I'll discuss quickly. We have Montana Conversations and Speakers in the Schools. Both of those programs are part of our Speakers Bureau. So we have experts, humanities enthusiasts that submit applications for programs to us. If accepted, we post them on our website, and any organization can actually go on our website, find a program that may be of interest to them, contact that particular speaker, coordinate a time. The organization would then submit an application, very quick turnaround, and then these individuals can go to those locations and present their humanities program. If you haven't checked out our programs in the past, I encourage you to hop on the website and see what we offer. Additionally, we are facilitating the Democracy Project, which is a team-led civic engagement project that is in coordination with local youth and public or school libraries in a variety of communities. Really amazing project. Again, check out the website for more information. We are also the home for the Montana Center for the Book, and we participate in Big Sky Reads, Big Sky Writes, and then there's also a Big Sky Reads stipend, and that is essentially an award, but it is run through the Montana Center for the Book, and this is a $500 stipend for a public book club. The other part of what we do and what you're all here for today is to talk about our grants. We currently offer 4 types of grants. Our mini grants are up to $2,000, and applications are due at least 4 to 6 weeks before your project activities begin. We are not going to talk about mini grants today. I will post a separate video specific to mini grants in the next month. The second category for our grant making is community project grants. These are for requests between $2,000 and $10,000. And we have 3 cycles. We accept community project grant applications on April 1st, August 1st, and December 1st. Our third category is our film and video grants, and these are up to $10,000. We accept applications for film and video once a year on August 1st. The fourth category is our public humanities fellowships. These are up to $4,000, and applications for these funding opportunities are due December 1st. Okay. We're going to jump right into eligibility and who may apply for funding from Humanities Montana. To be eligible to apply, the applicant or the applicant organization, as we often call our applicants, must be established in the United States or its jurisdictions as one of the following. Private nonprofit organizations, accredited institutions of higher education, state, local, and federally recognized tribal governments and agencies, including schools, libraries, museums, etc. Groups of persons that form an association to carry out a project for approved nonprofit purposes. If you fall into that category, please call me. It's very nuanced. And individuals only in the instance of research fellowships. Some other eligibility considerations. So not organizations or groups that apply to councils for funding must be constituted for nonprofit purposes. So there's this rare occasion where you may be eligible without having a federal tax ID, but we will have to do some work to ensure that we have evidence that you're constituted for nonprofit purposes. Individuals, with the exception of research fellows and other organizations, including foreign and for-profit entities, are ineligible. So individuals cannot apply for mini grants, community project grants, or film and video grants. However, individuals may apply for research fellowships. Applicant organizations must not function solely as fiscal agents or fiscal sponsors, but they must make substantive contributions to the success of the project. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But if you have a fiscal sponsor, let's talk about it. It doesn't automatically make you ineligible, but there is an and. Something else that they need to do in order to be eligible. Additionally, if you're an organization and you're applying, we are required to ask you for this unique entity ID, or what's commonly known as a UEI, and your federal tax ID number. And this is proof that you're a tax exempt entity or have nonprofit status. And this is required because we are subawarding federal dollars. So there's a couple things we have to do to stay compliant. We can help you figure out how to get your UEI if you don't have one. And we can also work with you to ensure that you're submitting the correct Form W-9 with your application. I like to get people started on their UEI early if they don't have one. So if your organization's eligible, we encourage you to engage skilled professionals to help carry out your programmatic activities. If the project leadership does not have experience in this space, talk to us about why that individual may be qualified to complete the project. And yeah, a couple resources. If you're not sure about your eligibility, we have a really quick and easy online eligibility survey that you can take. It should just take a few minutes, but it helps with that self-selection if you are unsure whether or not you can apply. I also encourage you to read the grant guidelines carefully. There's always additional information about eligibility in the guidelines, and it's a great reference document, again, to figure out whether or not you can apply for our funding. Additionally, repeat proposals are allowed. So if you're an organization, you've received funding from us before, specifically for a project that you're hoping that we might be able to support again. It's allowable, but you need to be aware that when you're submitting a proposal for an annual program or this repeat project of essentially the same format or nature, we do expect that you're requesting either the same or substantially less funding amount than for the initial project. And we do expect to see some innovation. That means if you asked for $5,000, you received a $5,000 award, but you want to come back for funding the next year for the same project, you could ask for $5,000 again or less. But unless you have some big change and some major innovation, we really wouldn't entertain a request more than what you had received before. And by innovation in the project, we mean demonstrating that you've taken feedback, if it's an event, from participants, that you've done some additional work to improve the program or to expand the program to a new audience or reach into new communities, just something that gives it a little bit more of an edge that second time around. And note that all of our funding is open and competitive, so there's never a guarantee if you're coming back for repeat funding that we will be able to do that. So it shouldn't, we work differently. We're not a foundation. We are this other type of grant maker. So quick note about substantive involvement. So this is specific to organizations that are applying to us who have a fiscal sponsor. Fiscal sponsorships are great in Montana so that you're not having to create another nonprofit. However, the federal, like NEH, the National Endowment for the Humanities, requires this slightly different level of involvement. So your fiscal agent couldn't just be taking the check, an award check, and then giving it to you. They have to be substantially involved in at least one or all of these ways. They need to monitor, that's obviously they can do some of these, but they could monitor the progress of a project. They could contribute to planning, research, the budget. They can talk about, or they could contribute to choices for personnel, information about the humanities content. They could provide direction and advice or mentorship to project management, and providing input on the grant product prior to completion, and contributing to the development of ancillary resources, and contributing to outreach and public engagement. So again, if you have a fiscal agent or a fiscal sponsor, we would just need to go through their level of substantive involvement before we would be able to move forward with an application. All right, so what do we fund? So historically, our annual subaward budget is somewhere between 100,000 and 150,000. And again, going into our fiscal year, which runs November 1st through October 31st. So this is actually the end of our fiscal year this month. Going into what we call fiscal year 2025, we will again have a $150,000 budget. So when you think about applying, think about that's the pool of money we're working with for all 4 grant categories over the course of 12 months. We have 3 granting cycles or deadlines and 1 ongoing open application opportunity. Mini grants, again, they are open as long as funding is available. This past year, we had to close them in July. Community project grants are open for applications December 1st, April 1st, August 1st. Film and video, again, are accepted once a year on August 1st, and fellowship applications are accepted once a year on December 1st. All of our applications are part of they're open and competitive, which means that they're part of an evaluation and will be considered on the quality of the application submitted, its relevance to the humanities, and the potential outreach and value to all Montana citizens. We encourage proposals that offer programming to or are led by communities with historically limited access to the humanities, including rural, Native or Indigenous communities, youth, and so on. And lastly, all of our grants are reviewed by staff and board members before final award decisions are made. All Humanities Montana funded projects must do these things. So they must focus on a clearly defined humanities theme. They must build on sound humanities scholarship. They need to deepen public understanding of significant humanities questions. They must approach subjects analytically, presenting a variety of perspectives on a topic. All projects must involve humanities scholars, and by scholars, it can include academic, professional, or subject expert. It doesn't necessarily have to be someone with a terminal degree in the humanities. We're looking for experts, people with lived experience that can provide well-vetted information to the public about a specific topic, right? That's what we're doing as a public humanities organization, is again, serving as that conduit for well-vetted information and giving the public greater access to it so that they can then have more informed opinions, conversations, and understanding about these different humanities subjects. All projects must employ appealing and accessible formats that will actively engage the general public in some type of learning. And they need to demonstrate support and involvement of communities and cultures represented in the project content and activities, or specifically address why they are not involved. For example, projects that are involving Native or Indigenous communities or cultures need to include letters of support from those participating scholars, researchers, or community partners. We need to know that you're not talking about a community without having them be involved. So, nothing about us without us. We encourage projects that promote this deeper understanding of Montana's history and culture, as well as those that examine themes and subjects in the humanities, again, that are relevant and important to Montana communities. Examples of supported humanities content or themes include, and note that the lists on your screen are not exhaustive. There's definitely space for creativity when we talk about themes and formats, but these are some basic themes and formats that we see on a regular basis. So you may have your theme might be literature, philosophy, history, all of those like traditional disciplines, but also natural and social sciences, environmental humanities, agricultural humanities, disability studies. There's even a field for medical humanities. There's all sorts of different spaces that the humanities live. And for project formats, it may be storytelling, historical analysis, writing workshops, book festivals, discussions, reading and discussion programs, or even humanities events like conferences, humanities labs, symposia, things like that, living history days. Those are all included. Okay. The things we cannot fund. We cannot fund projects that present a one-sided, uncritical treatment of an issue. We have had community project grant applications and fellowship applications that are, the way they're written, they are presenting an opinion and not necessarily this critical treatment of an issue, right? Projects that We cannot fund projects that focus on personal instead of public concerns. So again, we don't want, you may have an opinion about something, but we want you to submit an application for a project that's dealing with a public concern, and you're providing that well-vetted information. You're not providing your opinion. Promotion, we cannot fund things that are promotion of a particular political, religious, or ideological point of view. We cannot fund any type of political advocacy or advocacy of a particular program of social or political action. We cannot support specific public policies or legislation, lobbying, obscene, libelous, indecent, or defamatory content, including hate speech, personal attacks, or material constituting harassment. We cannot fund non-public meetings of organizations, although sometimes we'll consider funding programs that are open to the public but held in conjunction with the group's meeting, or if you're presenting a program with culturally sensitive information, you may limit your audience to a specific group. We cannot fund the construction, restoration, or operating expenses. This includes building materials and construction of exhibits, whether those are in history museums or art museums. You can't use our funds to pay for those materials. Equipment, property, or other capital purchases. And this is a new feature, unless they are critical to project implementation. If you're planning to purchase equipment, I think is really, or another capital purchase, definitely not property, but equipment, you will need prior approval before including that in your budget. We cannot fund museum or library acquisitions, except in really unusual circumstances. As we mentioned before, the creation and performance of art is unallowable. We cannot fund projects that would raise funds for profit-making groups or commercial purposes. So if you are a nonprofit organization and you would like to apply for funding and you're viewing us as some type of event sponsor, and you will be doing some fundraising at this event, this is not an appropriate type of project to talk to us about. No meals or refreshments for an audience unless there's a few caveats to that, but I think it would require a much more in-depth conversation. No alcoholic beverages, no support for candidates running for political office, fiscal agent and fiscal sponsorship fees, costs for activities performed by other federal entities, and projects that fall outside of the humanities. We mentioned some of those earlier. Additional funding restrictions, and I encourage you to refer to the grant guidelines for both of these grant opportunities for a more complete list. But you may not use Humanities Montana funds for the following purposes. So project activities that are completed outside of an approved project period of performance, which means that when we set your grant term, you cannot use our funds for approved project activities before that date or after the date that your grant term ends, right? It has to be spent in a very specific amount of time. If you need an extension, you will have to request that from us. And note, because we are federally funded, any unspent funds or funds spent in a way in an unapproved expense or outside of that grant period will need to be returned to us. So it's good to note that you can always reach out and talk to us about those expenses. You may not use Humanities Montana funds for general operations that are not related to the project. So think about general accounting or administrative support. That's not like it's just that general operating expense category. We just can't do that. We cannot use funds for preservation or cataloging of materials and collections. And one question that I'm often asked is about executive director salaries. In several instances, the executive director may be the only employee of an organization. Unfortunately, because executive directors by nature are administrative and only a certain percentage of their time can go to any one activity, the National Endowment for the Humanities does regulate our allowance for that salary for an executive director, no more than 10%. However, you can include other project personnel salary as long as it's specific to the project. And you may not include indirect project expenses exceeding 10% of the total award amount unless your organization has this federally negotiated indirect cost rate. And I've only seen that with universities and institutions of higher education. So if you're not a college or university, this NICRA may not apply to you. But again, if you have questions, I'm here to help you. So allowable expenses, these are your direct costs. Direct costs include expenses that are directly accountable to your proposed project activities and the fulfillment of your project outcomes. Some examples include, like I said, the limited project staff salary, project contractor, consultant, or scholar expenses. If you are conducting research and you'd like to pay, and you're interviewing individuals and you'd like to pay them for their time and their expertise, you can include their fees or their honoraria and provide a stipend. Those are things we often see. If you're working with a consultant or a contractor to carry out different aspects of the project, again, those are also eligible. Project-related travel, so this can include travel for both personnel and for your, I guess, additional personnel like project contractors, scholars, consultants. And we do allow mileage reimbursement at the federal rate, which is currently 67 cents per mile. Also lodging expenses, and meals are at this point not included, but I anticipate that in the spring I will have an additional update, but for now we are not including meals, so that is not updated on the slide. Additionally, project activities and materials. So project activities may include outreach, promotion. I see requests for everything for paid radio ads to boosted social media posts to creating flyers, paying staff to do outreach. Additionally, if you're doing research and you need to pay for access to archives, copyright fees, things like that, you can include those because they are specific and relevant to the success of your project, right? These are expenses you will need to incur in order to carry out your work. So think of it that way. That category tends to be a little bit more loose and free. So if you have questions about whether or not something would be eligible under project activities and materials, we can work together to figure that out. So allowable expenses, we did mention that up to 10% of your request can be allocated to indirect costs if you have them. And again, an indirect cost includes like your executive director's salary. So it could be one or the other, right? But if you include 10% of your executive director's salary, that's it. You can't include any other indirect costs. If you don't do that, you may be able to include up to 10% of other indirect costs that may be like general operating. If you have other funding and they've approved certain activities, you may be able to use it in line with those. very important to research fellows that indirect cost would be instruction, but typically teaching, developing curriculum for courses at educational institutions, things like that are unallowable, but it may be relevant. So one of the things you'd want to talk to us about. And you do not have to claim indirect costs. It's not required, but if you do charge indirect costs to the project, you must not charge those same costs to the project as direct costs. You can't list them in both places. All right. So one of the best ways to figure out who we fund and what we fund is to go onto our website under our grants awarded and look at past grantees, current or past grantees. You'll see a full list and a quick summary of each awardee. And then you can also go back. There's a link at the top of the page that you can actually open a PDF version of the same list from previous years. I think there's going back to maybe 2022 or earlier. That's really the best way to figure out who we fund and what we fund and how much we fund in different categories. The scope of the humanities is big. So referring to those will give you a good idea. Okay. So public humanities fellowships and community project grants. So our public humanities fellowships are for requests up to $4,000. And this is a competitive grant program intended to support research in the humanities relating to Montana and the region. Funds are to support independent scholars who can it's continuous work on a humanities project for a period of 6 consecutive months. So project activities can occur between April 1st and September 30th. So it's the only project where we have like that set 6-month time frame, but this allows you to sort of compartmentalize and complete your project activities and move on. You do not have to create, if you're doing research and you're writing a chapter for a book, the book does not need to be published in 6 months. You do not need to provide the final publication. You just have to complete the research that you outlined in your proposal. Funds can go towards research or compensation, so the value of your time. I'm often asked, what does that look like? Well, what would you charge hourly? You might have to do some work in that space to figure out what that might look like. Travel expenses, as I mentioned earlier, and other costs related to that proposed scholarly research. So again, those fees and unexpected things that you might have to pay for in order to do your research. Also, we ask with our public humanities fellowships that there's a delivery of a public program in Montana or to a Montana audience at the end. So between April 1st and September 30th, there's 2 parts. You would receive, if you're awarded the full $4,000, you would receive an initial payment of $3,600 for your research, writing, travel, all of that. In September, after you talk to us about your event and it's planned and you've done some outreach and we know what's happening, then you would receive that final installment of $400. So it'll come in 2 parts. So you need to complete your research and your public programming within the 6-month time frame. Other things to consider: eligibility. Individuals, not organizations or institution of higher education, are eligible to apply. And in the guidelines, there's a comprehensive list of what type of individual or other things you might want to consider before applying. This talks about residency, independent scholars, students, mentorships, dissertation revisions, faculty and staff. And any comments about collaborative projects. So I encourage you to read through, if you have questions about any of that, I'd go through the guidelines carefully. There's a summary of parameters for each type of potential fellow. I will note that if you're a student, if you're completing your dissertation or a thesis or doing any type of research that will contribute to the completion of a degree, that is not eligible. It has to be independent from your degree completion. If you are a professor and you're applying, your research has to be independent of your faculty position. The products for fellowships, as we mentioned, I'll go back. There's no cost match required for fellowships. So it's $4,000, but I guarantee you will more than make up for cost match with the value of your time not paid for through the fellowship. For products, as I mentioned, you have to have some type of end of your research. Like if you say, I'm going to do these 3 things in my research, then you need to do all 3 of those. And then you have to host a public program. Again, if it's culturally sensitive information, you can present it to a limited audience. You may do virtual presentations, but it does need to be an opportunity for you to share what you've learned through your research with a public audience, right? So that, again, that conduit, taking well-vetted information and sharing it with the community. The period of performance, again, is this April 1st through September 30th timeframe. So timeline for applications, so November 15th, that's your consultation deadline. You can easily access my calendar and schedule a 30-minute consultation directly from the website. During that meeting, you just talk to me about your project idea and we sort out anything that I think may be a barrier to applying or things that I think you should really emphasize. December 1st is your application deadline. So applications are due on December 1st. So if you can get those to me by midnight, that's perfect. Anything after that will be ineligible unless we had a conversation about an extension beforehand. We will make decision announcements on between March 1st and March 15th. And research fellowships may begin as early as April 1st, but they do need to be fully executed and completed by September 30th. Resources for fellowships include our website, where you will find our application guidelines, a PDF version of our application question list, so you can easily print that out and refer to it, and then you can go back and forth between the guidelines and the application question list. If you're like, what are they asking? The guidelines will provide additional context. We have an FAQ section on the website. This webinar, as other webinars, are recorded and available for you on demand. You can fast forward through the parts that aren't relevant and just refocus again on those things that are really pertinent to your application. The 30-minute staff consultation, I can't stress that enough. We really get through so many of the questions that applicants typically run into as they're filling out the application forms. We can kind of do all of that in person, and it makes it much easier. I will review draft applications. It just depends on my staff. It just depends on my capacity. As the closer we get to the deadline, the more requests I get. So it's not a guarantee, but if I'm able, I am happy to do that. Okay. Community project grant. So these are for requests, again, between $2,000 and $10,000. And community project grants support well-planned humanities projects that have this clear beginning, middle, and end. Right? Our funds support eligible organizations, not individuals. And projects that have been funded in the past include all of these, which I listed earlier, these different formats. Again, we are open to new creative formats and themes. This is the great thing to pitch to me during the 30-minute consultation. But essentially, these grants are designed to support a vast array of bold and innovative projects that are meaningful to local communities and inspire these timely community conversations. And again, in the community project grant, you have to include a work plan. So that's where that clear beginning, middle, and end comes into play. Eligibility for community project grants, again, we only award community project grants to organizations, individuals, for-profit entities, or organizations serving solely as fiscal agents without that substantive contribution may not apply. We do require a one-to-one cost match for community project grants. That means if you ask for $5,000 in your project budget, you will need to demonstrate that you have an additional $5,000 of either in-kind or other secured funding in the amount of $5,000 or greater. There's great information. There'll be budget instruction document that'll be uploaded to the website. But if you're curious, you can always hop over to the film and video page where I do have budget instructions included. You can also call me and we can work through cost match. So community project grants do require the involvement of at least one humanities scholar, which again could be a subject expert. And you will need a letter of commitment from at least one scholar, right? You can have multiple scholars working on the project, but you do need to provide evidence that this person has been contacted and that they're committed to participating in the way that you're describing. We do this because Montana's humanities community is small, and we've had board members who have been listed as experts, but never contacted by the applicant, and it didn't work out in that applicant's favor to list someone who'd never been contacted about the project. So we added this piece because it's important that and it's good for your project as well, to know that you've reached out and that someone is going to be able to step in and be involved in your project. And this contributes to that well-vetted piece. Products for community projects, your project or your program must appeal to a broad public audience, and it must be specific, timely, and relevant to Montana. I'm going to go back to this again. I just said it, but it's important. Community project grants require a one-to-one cost share match, again, from other funding sources or through in-kind donations of goods and services. And at least one humanities scholar or subject expert must participate and contribute to the project. The winter timelines, this is specific to the upcoming deadline for community projects. Again, consultation deadline is November 15th. December 1st is the application deadline. Decisions will be announced no later than March 15th. And your project start date is no earlier than March 1st. Obviously, we can't give you awards. You can't use funds that we haven't told you have before your project starts. So project start dates are March 1st, and that could mean that it's not that your project starts on March 1st, it's just that the project activities you're asking us to support start on March 1st or after. Project end date. This is fairly open based on our grant term. I advise estimating when you think your project activities will be completed and then adding an additional 30 days. And if your project end date, if we need to shift that after the awards announced, we can do that. But just when you're building your project, when you're thinking about that grant term, give yourself some space for things, unforeseen circumstances, right? Okay, your community project resources are very similar to those for the research fellowships. On our website, there's a community project grant page. You'll see a downloadable PDF version of the application guidelines, the application question list. There's the FAQs, the recorded webinars, the 30-minute staff consultation. And again, I will review drafts on request if I have the capacity to do so. Please note that for the community project grants, as of today, October 8th, the guidelines and the application questions will be updated, but there will be no major changes. You'll just see that they're maybe formatted differently, or the application is a little more succinct, but no major changes to the form. So you are free to look at the guidelines and the application question list. And as soon as I update those things, the application will be open in our portal. Okay, how to apply. So we have several grant resources, most I just mentioned, so I won't go through those again. Just know at the end, if you are awarded, we also have resources for final reporting, and budgets and award management. So there's a lot of resources on the website. I encourage you to jump on there and see what we have to offer. So step one, I can't emphasize this enough, is to read the grant guidelines. They're long, they're dry, but at least get really comfortable with what's included so that as you're going through the application, as you're talking with me, you know where to go to get more detail. And you'll be referring back to those grant guidelines as you fill out your application. So that's step one. Step two is to schedule a 30-minute consultation with me. It's really simple. If you can't make it, we can always find some other way to do it, but we can meet via Zoom, we can talk over the phone, or we can do an in-person meeting, whatever works best with you. You'll access my calendar, you'll find available times, and you'll be able to just select, and then it'll pop up on my calendar. And before you start writing responses to your application, definitely check out our online application portal. All applications need to be submitted through this portal. And you want to make sure that you have an account. So you want to, if you're tied to an organization and you've applied before and you're not sure if the organization has an account or not, you can reach out to me and we can sort through that. If you're an individual researcher who's applying for the fellowship, please note that when you set up your account, it will ask you for a tax ID number. You can just put zeros in that one because you don't have one as an individual. But we can also go through that during the consultation if you have questions. Once you've read the guidelines and we've met and you're feeling confident and ready to apply, you can move into our online application system and begin your application. Note on the screen, it says upon LOI, which is the letter of inquiry approval, we have done away with that feature or that component of the application. So now you will just be, after the consultation, you will be able to complete your application. You can add your content and save it. But I also encourage you to create your responses in a Word document or notes or something like that. And then you can copy and paste into the application. If you don't hit save, it could all go away. So make sure you're creating your responses in two separate places. Okay, so a couple quick tips for successful applications. Make sure they're accurate and complete, that they're well organized, that they're clear and concise, provide adequate detail about the project's purpose and how it's strongly rooted in the humanities. There's nothing more challenging for us than trying to figure out the humanities theme from your proposal. You need to be able to articulate why this is a humanities project. Not easy, but that's really that's the meat of your proposal. So make sure it's very clear. and focus on what you're asking us to fund, right? If this is a small part of a much larger project, give us an overview of the larger project, but really focus in on those things that you're asking us to support and why you think we are the best funder for these particular items. Okay. Make sure that you provide enough detail. We do get some applicants that'll just put in the bare minimum. That's not helpful either. We don't want too much. We don't want too little. Don't focus on why you need funding and how you plan to, oh, that's not right. Okay, just ignore that. Bad applications don't articulate the need and the benefit or the benefit that the project will bring to the community. So make sure that you're articulating like why this is needed, how you know this project is important, and how you will know that your proposed audience is benefiting from your work, right? And make sure that you're demonstrating adequate reach and impact, and have have another set of eyes, have someone else review your application to make sure that it's easy to understand. I can't stress this enough for scholars, for the fellowships. Think of, you can actually go on our website and look at our list of board members. They will be the ones reviewing and evaluating your project proposal. So make sure that you are presenting your project in a way that maybe non-scholars or people outside of academia can understand what your project is. After an application is submitted, staff review for eligibility and compliance. If there's any major issues, we'll reach out to you. But for public humanities fellowships and community project grants, the applications will be evaluated by an external reviewer and our grants committee, as well as other board members. The grants committee will meet, they will discuss projects that exceed a certain percentage, like they have the highest merit of all the projects. And then they will meet in February and present those recommendations to the full board. And then the full board will need to vote on on funding awards. So that's why we have that March 1st deadline, because we have to wait for the board to do their thing before we can make these announcements. And as soon as we have that decision from the board, staff will announce your decisions in March for the December applications. And a few final thoughts. We are here to help you through the application process, and your success in the humanities is our success. We want you to succeed, and we want you to use us as a partner, right? If you're in the business of humanities and you live in Montana and you want to create greater access to humanities programming, we want to partner with you. So think of us as a partner. Make sure that you're contacting me with questions, and just staying in contact, and we can find a way, right? That's our goal. If you have any questions, here is my contact information. As I mentioned, you can access my calendar directly from the website and reach out by phone or email if you have additional questions.